everything. Perfection promises safety, but it silently steals your momentum. It convinces you to wait, to hesitate, to polish endlessly while life moves forward without you. Progress, on the other hand, everything asks for something far more powerful: imperfect action taken consistently. Everything. This audiobook is an invitation to release the pressure of getting everything right and replace it with a system that actually moves your life forward. Not someday. Not when you're ready. Everything. But starting now. Perfectionism often disguises itself as ambition. It sounds responsible, it feels disciplined, it even earns praise, but beneath that polished surface, everything, perfectionism quietly freezes momentum and drains confidence. Most people who feel stuck don't lack talent, intelligence, or drive. What they lack is permission to move forward imperfectly. Everything. And until that permission is granted, progress remains trapped behind invisible standards that can never truly be met. Think about how perfectionism usually shows up. Everything. You tell yourself you'll start once you have more time, more clarity, more resources, or more confidence. You want the plan to be airtight, the conditions ideal, the timing flawless. Everything. On the surface, it looks like preparation, but emotionally, it feels heavy. There's tension instead of excitement, pressure instead of curiosity, and slowly, without realizing it, everything, waiting becomes your default behavior. Perfectionism creates fear because it ties your worth to outcomes. If something must be perfect, then mistakes are no longer neutral events. Everything. They become personal failures. Every action carries emotional risk. Every attempt feels like a test of your intelligence, your discipline, your potential. Everything. So your nervous system does what it's designed to do. It protects you. It convinces you to delay, to overthink, to stay where it's safe. This isn't laziness. It's self-preservation. Everything. Many people grow up learning that praise comes from doing things right. Good grades, good behavior, clean results. Over time, that conditioning turns into an internal rule. Everything. If it's not impressive, don't show it. If it's not flawless, don't begin. The adult version of that rule sounds like high standards, but emotionally it feels like constant self-surveillance. Everything. You're always watching yourself, judging yourself, correcting yourself before you even act. This is why perfectionism leads to procrastination. Not because you don't care, everything, but because you care too much about getting it right. Starting becomes overwhelming because the imagined version of success is massive and rigid. You don't see the first small step, everything. You see the entire staircase all at once. And since you can't guarantee the top, you hesitate at the bottom, everything. Consider the person who wants to start a business but spends years researching instead of selling. Or the writer who rewrites the first page endlessly but never finishes a chapter. Everything. Or the student who delays applying because they're afraid of rejection. From the outside, it looks like inaction. From the inside, everything. It feels like pressure so intense that movement feels dangerous. Perfectionism also fuels self-doubt. When the standard is perfection, anything less feels like proof that you're not enough. Everything. Every small misstep becomes evidence against you. Instead of learning from experience, you collect reasons to criticize yourself, and over time, confidence erodes. Everything. Not because you failed too often, but because you never allowed yourself to try freely. There's a subtle exhaustion that comes with this mindset. Everything. You're constantly holding yourself back while telling yourself it's temporary. You promise that once things are clearer, you'll move. Once you feel ready, you'll act. Everything. But readiness becomes a moving target. And the longer you wait, the heavier starting feels. What's eye-opening for many people is realizing that excellence rarely comes from perfection. Everything. It comes from repetition, from feedback, from showing up before you feel prepared. Most of the people you admire didn't begin with confidence, they built it through action. Everything. Their early work was messy. Their first attempts were flawed, but they allowed those flaws to exist long enough to learn from them. Perfectionism blocks that learning process. Everything. It wants you to master something before you practice it. But mastery is the result of practice, not the prerequisite. When you refuse to act until you're perfect, everything, you deny yourself the very experiences that would make you better. There's also a control issue hidden inside perfectionism. When outcomes must be perfect, you try to control every variable, everything. But life doesn't cooperate that way. Unexpected challenges, mistakes, and setbacks are inevitable. When they happen, everything. Perfectionism interprets them as signs to stop rather than signals to adapt. Progress-oriented people adjust. Perfection-oriented people retreat. Everything. Relief begins when you realize the problem was never your motivation. You were never lazy or undisciplined. You were carrying a standard that no human can sustain. Once you see that, everything, the shame loosens its grip. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What would happen if I allowed myself to begin where I am?" Everything. Actionable change doesn't require eliminating standards, it requires redefining them. Instead of asking whether something is perfect, ask whether it moves you forward. Everything. Instead of waiting for confidence, use action to generate it. Confidence is not a personality trait, it's a byproduct of evidence. Everything. Every imperfect step is evidence that you can handle discomfort, learn, and continue. One practical shift is to set progress-based goals. Everything. Most people underestimate progress because they are trained to look for explosions instead of movement. We celebrate overnight success stories, sudden transformations, everything, and dramatic breakthroughs, but we quietly ignore the slow, invisible work that actually creates them. And because of that, many people feel like they're failing when, in reality, everything. They're simply progressing in a way that doesn't make noise yet. Small, consistent progress doesn't feel impressive in the moment. It feels almost boring. Everything. It's showing up when no one is watching. It's making a little effort even when you don't feel inspired. It's choosing to move forward by 1 inch instead of waiting for the perfect mile. Everything. But what makes this kind of progress powerful is not how it feels today, it's what it becomes over time. Think about how confidence is built. Not through one perfect performance, everything, but through repeated exposure to action. The first time you try something new, it feels awkward. The second time, slightly less so. The 10th time, you begin to trust yourself. Everything. And eventually, what once required effort becomes part of who you are. That transformation didn't happen because you were extraordinary. It happened because you were consistent. Everything. There's a quiet reassurance that comes from knowing you don't have to change your entire life in a single moment. You don't have to fix everything today. Everything. You don't need perfect clarity before you begin. You only need enough courage to take the next small step, and then another after that. Everything. Imagine someone who wants to get in shape. They look at a perfectly sculpted body online and immediately feel overwhelmed. They think they need intense workouts, strict diets, everything, and flawless discipline from day one. But the truth is, real transformation often starts with something far less dramatic, like walking for 10 minutes a day. Everything. That walk doesn't feel life-changing. But done consistently, it strengthens the habit of showing up. It builds trust. It proves, quietly and repeatedly, everything. I am someone who keeps promises to myself. The same principle applies to your career, your relationships, your mindset, and your personal growth. Everything. Reading a few pages every day builds more knowledge than waiting for the perfect time to read an entire book. Everything. Writing a single paragraph daily builds a stronger voice than waiting for a burst of inspiration to write a masterpiece. Progress compounds when action becomes normal. Everything. What holds people back is not a lack of ability. It's the belief that small efforts don't matter. But small efforts are the only ones that actually stick. Everything. They don't overwhelm your nervous system. They don't demand a version of you that doesn't exist yet. They meet you where you are and gently pull you forward. Everything. There's also freedom in this approach. When progress becomes the goal, mistakes lose their power. A misstep no longer means failure. It becomes part of the process. If you miss a day, everything. You don't collapse into guilt. You simply return the next day. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means resilience. Think about how habits are formed in real life. Everything. No one becomes disciplined overnight. Discipline is built through repetition, not pressure. Each small action reinforces a message to your brain, this is who I am now. Over time, everything. Those messages stack. And eventually your identity begins to shift. You stop forcing yourself to act and start acting naturally. This is where compounding effort comes in. Everything. Just like money grows with interest, effort grows with repetition. The benefits of today's small action might not show up tomorrow, but they will show up eventually. And when they do, everything they arrive multiplied. Skills sharpen, confidence deepens, resistance weakens. What once felt hard becomes familiar. There's a powerful story hidden inside almost every success you admire. Everything. Behind the scenes, there were countless unremarkable days. Days where progress felt slow, days where motivation was low, days where the results didn't match the effort yet. Everything. But those days mattered more than the highlight moments because they built the foundation. You don't need to do everything. You just need to do something, consistently. Ask yourself simple, everything, honest questions. What is one small action I can take today that moves me slightly forward? What is something I can repeat even on my worst days? Everything. What version of progress feels sustainable instead of exhausting? When you answer those questions, you begin designing a system instead of chasing motivation. Systems don't rely on mood. Everything they rely on structure. And structure creates stability. Stability creates momentum. Momentum creates change. Everything. There's also a subtle emotional shift that happens when you focus on daily progress. You stop measuring your worth by outcomes and start measuring it by effort. Everything. You go to sleep knowing you showed up. That feeling builds quiet confidence. Not the loud kind that needs validation, but the grounded kind that knows it's moving in the right direction. Everything. Even setbacks look different through this lens. A setback isn't proof that you're incapable. It's proof that you're in motion. You can't stumble if you're standing still. Everything. Every mistake contains information. Every imperfect attempt teaches you something that thinking never could. Progress over perfection allows you to grow without self-punishment. Everything. It replaces harsh self. Most people believe clarity comes first and action comes second. They tell themselves, once I'm sure, I'll start. Or, when I feel confident, everything, I'll move. But that order is a lie we've all been taught, and it's the reason so many dreams stay trapped in the mind instead of showing up in real life. Everything. Clarity is not the entry fee for action. Action is the price you pay to earn clarity. Think about how learning has always worked, even when you were younger. Everything. You didn't wait until you fully understood how to walk before taking your first step. You stood, you wobbled, you fell, and you stood again. Every fall gave feedback. Everything. Every attempt refined balance. Walking didn't come from thinking about walking. It came from doing it badly until your body figured it out. That same principle hasn't changed. Everything. Only our expectations have. As adults, we're taught to avoid mistakes. We start believing that errors mean incompetence rather than education. So we wait. We plan, we research. Everything. We gather information until it feels safe. But safety, in this context, is an illusion. No amount of thinking can replace the information you gain from real movement. Everything. You can read 100 books about swimming, but until you get in the water, you won't know how your body responds, where you panic, or how you actually float. Everything. Overthinking feels productive because it keeps us busy without exposing us. Planning feels responsible because it doesn't risk embarrassment. But often, everything. It's just fear wearing professional clothing, fear of looking foolish, fear of failing publicly, fear of discovering that we're not as ready as we hoped. Yet the truth is this: everything. Readiness is built, not discovered. Confidence is not found in thought, it's forged in experience. Consider someone who wants to start a business. They spend months refining ideas, everything, adjusting logos, waiting for the perfect time. Meanwhile, another person with half the preparation launches something simple, imperfect, and real. Everything. That second person learns faster in 1 month than the first learns in a year of planning. Why? Because reality teaches lessons imagination never can. Customers respond. Problems show up. Everything. Skills sharpen. Feedback becomes clear. Action turns confusion into direction. The same applies to personal growth. You don't become confident by rehearsing confidence in your head. Everything. You become confident by surviving situations that once scared you. Each time you act despite uncertainty, your nervous system learns a new truth. Everything. I can handle this. That learning doesn't happen while waiting. It only happens while moving. Mistakes, then, are not interruptions to progress. They are progress. They're information. Everything. They show you what works, what doesn't, and what needs adjustment. When you treat mistakes as data instead of disasters, something powerful shifts. You stop asking, everything, what if I fail? And start asking, what can I learn? Curiosity replaces fear. Growth replaces paralysis. Think of any skill you admire: speaking confidently, leading others, everything, creating something meaningful. None of those were perfected in silence. They were shaped in messy conversations, awkward attempts, and repeated effort. Everything. The people you admire didn't avoid mistakes, they accumulated them faster than most. There's a quiet freedom in accepting that you don't need to have it all figured out. Everything. You only need to take the next honest step. Not the perfect step, not the impressive step, just the next one. That step will reveal something, and that revelation will guide the next move. Everything. This is how momentum is born, not through certainty, but through commitment. Waiting often feels like patience, but it's usually avoidance. Action, even small action, is an act of trust. Everything. Trust in your ability to adapt. Trust that you'll learn what you need along the way. Trust that you are more capable than your doubts suggest. Everything. A useful way to approach action is to treat everything as an experiment. When experiments fail, we don't take it personally, we We adjust the variables. If you apply that mindset to your life, everything. Pressure dissolves. You're no longer proving your worth with every step. You're simply testing, observing, and refining. That mindset alone can unlock movement where fear once lived. Everything. Start asking yourself different questions. Instead of, what's the best possible plan? Ask, everything. What's the smallest action that moves me forward today? Instead of, what if this doesn't work? Ask, everything. What will this teach me? These questions redirect your energy from perfection to progress. There will be moments when discomfort rises. That's normal. Everything. Growth always feels unfamiliar before it feels natural. But discomfort is not a stop sign. It's a signal that learning is happening. Every time you act despite discomfort, everything, you expand your tolerance for uncertainty. And that tolerance is one of the most valuable skills you can develop in a changing world. Action builds identity as well. Everything. Each time you show up imperfectly, you reinforce the belief that you are someone who moves forward. Over time, that identity becomes stronger than your fear. Everything. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying and start seeing yourself as someone doing. That shift changes everything. You don't need permission to begin. Everything. You don't need flawless confidence. You don't need complete clarity. You need movement. Even slow movement counts. Even awkward movement counts. Everything. The only thing that doesn't count is standing still while waiting for a feeling that only action can create. And as you move, something unexpected happens. Everything. The fear that once felt overwhelming shrinks. The task becomes clearer. The path reveals itself step by step, not all at once. Everything. You realize that the person you were waiting to become is built through the very actions you were postponing. This is how progress actually works. Not through flawless execution. Everything. But through honest engagement. Not through endless preparation, but through courageous participation. Every action teaches. Every attempt strengthens. Every lesson compounds. Everything. So instead of asking whether you're ready, ask whether you're willing to learn. Because learning through action doesn't just give you skills, it gives you self-trust. Everything. And self-trust is the foundation of everything that follows. Most people don't fail because they lack motivation. They fail because their lives are not built to support progress. Everything. They wake up each day relying on willpower, discipline, or mood, and when those run out, as they always do, everything collapses. Everything. What actually determines consistency is not how badly you want something, but how well your systems carry you forward when motivation is gone. Everything. A system is simply the structure that makes progress easier than stopping. It is the quiet force working in the background, shaping your behavior without asking for emotional effort. Everything. When systems are designed correctly, progress becomes the default. When they aren't, perfectionism takes over, because perfectionism thrives in chaos. Everything. Think about how most people approach goals. They set an outcome in their mind, a perfect body, a flawless business plan, a finished book, a transformed life. Everything. Then they judge themselves daily against that outcome. Every small mistake feels like failure. Every missed day feels like proof they're not disciplined enough. The pressure builds. Everything. The joy disappears, and eventually they quit, not because they can't do it, but because the process feels unbearable. Systems change that dynamic entirely. A good system doesn't ask, everything, did I win today? It asks, did I show up? It shifts success from results to participation. And that single shift removes most of the emotional weight people carry. Everything. Imagine someone trying to start exercising. A perfection-based approach says, I need a full workout, the right clothes, the right plan, at least 45 minutes, everything, and visible results within weeks. A progress-based system says, put your shoes on and move your body for 5 minutes. One approach creates resistance. The other creates momentum. Everything. And momentum, once established, does most of the work for you. The most powerful systems are built around reducing friction. Friction is anything that makes starting harder. Everything. Too many decisions. Too much setup. Too much emotional pressure. Every extra step is an opportunity for the mind to talk you out of action. Everything. That's why people with strong systems often look disciplined when in reality, they've just made the right thing easier and the wrong thing harder. If you want to write consistently, everything, don't rely on inspiration. Rely on access. Keep your writing space ready. Keep the document open. Remove the expectation that every session must produce something brilliant. Everything. The system's only job is to get words on the page. Quality emerges later. Movement comes first. This is where many people misunderstand habits. Everything. They think habits are about forcing yourself to do difficult things repeatedly. In truth, habits are about designing environments that quietly guide behavior. Everything. Your environment is shaping you far more than your intentions ever will. What's visible gets done. What's hidden gets ignored. What's easy becomes automatic. Look around your daily life. Everything. If distractions are always within reach, distraction will win. If healthy choices require effort and unhealthy ones are effortless, your system is already deciding for you. Everything. Changing behavior often starts with rearranging your surroundings, not your mindset. Another key element of progress, focused systems, is lowering the emotional cost of failure. Everything. Perfectionism makes mistakes feel expensive. Systems make mistakes irrelevant. When the goal is consistency, a bad day doesn't erase progress. It becomes part of the process. Everything. Missing once is a data point, not a disaster. Think of progress like steering a ship. You don't need perfect direction at all times. You need small, consistent corrections. Everything. Systems allow for drift without collapse. They assume imperfection and plan for it. This is especially important during low-energy days. A perfectionist system collapses when energy drops. Everything. A progress-based system scales down instead of shutting off. On days when you can't give your best, the system allows you to give your minimum and still counts that as success. Everything. That's how consistency survives real life. Consider someone building a business. If their system only rewards big wins, huge launches, viral growth, perfect execution, everything, they will feel constant pressure and frequent disappointment. But if their system rewards daily outreach, learning small improvements, and showing up even when nothing dramatic happens, everything, progress becomes sustainable. Confidence grows not from massive wins, but from repeated proof that you can keep moving. Systems also protect you from emotional swings. Everything. When motivation is high, you move. When motivation is low, the system moves you anyway. This creates trust in yourself. Everything. You stop seeing progress as something fragile that depends on how you feel, and start seeing it as something reliable. One of the most overlooked aspects of system building is self-talk. Everything. The language you use internally either reinforces perfection or progress. If your internal voice only acknowledges success when outcomes are perfect, everything, you train yourself to associate effort with stress. But if your internal voice acknowledges effort itself, showing up, trying, continuing, you create emotional safety. Everything. And emotional safety is essential for long-term growth. This doesn't mean lowering standards. It means separating standards from self-worth. Everything. Systems allow you to pursue excellence without punishing yourself during the learning phase. They allow you to improve without self-attack. Everything. A useful way to think about this is to design systems that answer one simple question every day. What is the smallest version of this habit that still counts? When you answer that honestly, everything, you remove the all or nothing trap. You give yourself permission to continue. Progress-based systems also focus on identity reinforcement. Everything. Each small action is evidence of who you are becoming. You're not someone who works out perfectly. You're someone who doesn't quit. You're not someone who writes brilliantly. Everything. You're someone who writes consistently. Identity grows from repetition, not intensity. Over time, these systems compound. What starts as small, everything, unimpressive actions becomes undeniable momentum. You don't notice the change day to day, but months later, you realize you're no longer fighting yourself. The process feels lighter. Everything, the resistance is lower. Progress feels normal. And perhaps most importantly, systems restore peace. When your life is structured to support progress, everything, you no longer wake up negotiating with yourself. You don't carry the weight of constant self-judgment. You trust the process because the process has proven itself. Everything. You begin to understand that success is not something you force into existence through pressure. It's something you build patiently through structure. Systems remove drama. Everything. They replace urgency with reliability. They turn growth into something calm, steady, and sustainable. This chapter isn't about doing more. It's about designing better. Better systems. Everything. Better environments. Better definitions of success. When you stop demanding perfection and start rewarding progress, everything, your life stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like a path you can actually walk, one step at a time. Everything. There comes a moment in every meaningful journey when motivation is no longer enough. Inspiration fades, discipline fluctuates. Everything. And the excitement of starting something new gives way to the quiet reality of showing up again and again. This is where most people stop, not because they lack talent, intelligence, everything, or potential, but because they never learned how to move forward when things feel unfinished, imperfect, or uncomfortable. Everything. Becoming someone who moves forward no matter what is not about willpower. It is about identity. It is about deciding at a deep internal level. Everything. That progress is no longer something you try to do, it is who you are. Think about the people you admire most, the ones who seem steady, grounded, and quietly effective. Everything. They are not flawless. They do not always feel confident. They simply keep moving. They have built a relationship with action that does not depend on mood, clarity, or perfect conditions. Everything. They have stopped asking, "Am I ready?" and started asking, "What is the next small step I can take right now?" Over time, that question becomes automatic. And when it does, everything, momentum becomes inevitable. Many people misunderstand progress over perfection as lowering standards. In reality, it is the opposite. It is choosing standards that are sustainable. Everything. Perfectionism demands that everything be right before you begin. Progress demands that you begin so things can get better. One mindset freezes you in place, everything. The other carries you forward even on difficult days. When progress becomes part of your identity, failure loses its power. Mistakes become information, not evidence that you are incapable. Everything. Delays become part of the process, not reasons to quit. Consider someone learning a new skill, writing, fitness, business, or even rebuilding their confidence after a setback. Everything. The perfectionist version of that person waits for the perfect plan, the perfect timing, the perfect feeling of certainty. Weeks pass, months pass, nothing changes. Everything. The progress-focused version shows up messy. They write sentences that aren't great. They do workouts that feel awkward. They make decisions without knowing every outcome. And slowly, everything, almost quietly, their life begins to shift. Not because they did everything right, but because they kept going. Moving forward no matter what does not mean ignoring your emotions. Everything. It means not letting them decide your actions. You can feel tired and still take a step. You can feel unsure and still move. You can feel disappointed and still continue. Everything. This is a powerful realization because most people believe they need confidence to act when in reality action is what creates confidence. Every time you move despite discomfort, everything, you send yourself a message: I can be trusted. I don't abandon myself when things get hard. Over time, that trust becomes unshakable. Identity is built through evidence. Everything. You do not wake up one day believing you are consistent. You become consistent by acting consistently. You do not convince yourself that you are resilient through positive thinking alone. Everything. You prove it to yourself by continuing when it would be easier to stop. Each small act of progress is a vote for the person you are becoming. And when those votes accumulate, everything, your self-image changes naturally. You no longer force discipline. You simply behave in alignment with who you know yourself to be. There will be days when progress feels invisible. Everything. Days when the effort seems larger than the reward. This is where most people break the habit of moving forward. But those are often the most important days. Progress is not linear. Everything. And growth does not announce itself. Much of it happens quietly, beneath the surface, long before results are visible. When you understand this, everything, you stop demanding immediate proof that your effort is working. You trust the process because you trust yourself. Everything. One of the most stabilizing habits you can develop is defining success in a way that is fully within your control. Not outcomes, not recognition, not speed, but effort and follow through. Everything. Did you show up today? Did you take a step, however small? That becomes the win. This reframing removes pressure and replaces it with consistency. Everything. You stop riding emotional highs and crashing into disappointment. You build a steady rhythm that carries you forward even when life feels unpredictable. Real life will interrupt you. Everything. Plans will fall apart. Energy will drop. Unexpected challenges will appear. Becoming someone who moves forward no matter what does not mean pretending these things won't happen. Everything. It means deciding in advance that when they do, you will adjust instead of quit. Maybe you move slower, maybe you simplify. Maybe you rest and then resume. Everything. But you do not disappear from your own life. You stay engaged with your direction, even if the pace changes. There is quiet strength in this approach. Everything. It does not rely on intensity or dramatic transformation. It relies on reliability, on being the person who continues. Over time, this reliability compounds into confidence, clarity, everything, and competence. You start to notice that challenges don't destabilize you the way they used to. You recover faster. You adapt more easily, not because life got easier, everything, but because you became stronger through motion. Progress over perfection is not a rule you follow. It is a lens through which you see yourself. When something isn't perfect, everything, you no longer see it as a failure, you see it as a draft. When you fall behind, you don't spiral into self-criticism. You simply re-enter the process. Everything. This mindset creates emotional resilience. It removes drama from discipline and replaces it with maturity. At some point, you realize you no longer need to motivate yourself the way you once did. You don't negotiate with resistance endlessly. You don't wait for the right feeling. You move because moving is what you do. This is the moment when progress becomes automatic, not because it's easy, but because it's familiar, and familiarity breeds confidence. There is deep peace in knowing that no matter what happens, you will keep going, that you are not fragile, that setbacks do not define you, that unfinished work does not shame you. This peace does not come from perfection, it comes from persistence. From the quiet promise you keep to yourself every day, I will take the next step. As this principle becomes part of you, life begins to feel less overwhelming. Big goals no longer intimidate you because you understand they are built one step at a time. You stop rushing and start trusting. You stop demanding certainty and start creating it through action. And without realizing it, you become someone others look to for stability, not because you have all the answers, but because you never stop moving forward.